Bauer Brown here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. In the video that I have for you guys today, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different, and I'm going to be answering a question. Oh, yes, not just any question. This is one in particular, okay? And it's one of you guys asked me this one. Now, normally when I answer questions, I just pretty much just stick to the comment section and that's that. Pretty soon it'll be Discord and maybe the forum on the website. But like I said, for now, it's usually the comments, but this one was a little bit different. I figured there's something I'd like to show you guys with this one. I'd like to show everybody. So that's what we're going to get into today. Okay. Now, the question was, it was more of a scenario. All right. Now, let me pose two scenarios here. The first one, if you've gotten far enough along in your map build to be able to go in game and test things, you may realize at some point or another, maybe you're driving down one of your roads and you see a stop sign or some other kind of sign that's laying down on the road. All right. Well, you know that you didn't leave it there, so you can only guess it had something to do with the game. You know, maybe one of the AIs or something drove it over, or not quite sure how it ended up down there. All right. But it does make sense that this would happen in a game environment, right? In a runtime environment where things are able to move, you know, vehicles are able to travel, you know, signs are able to move, even though signs don't usually move unless you get run over. Birds are flying, deer are running, tractors driving. You get the idea, right? So it's a runtime. It's you know, the runtime environment. Giant's editor is the exact opposite, right? It's a static environment. You know, you put a stop sign down and that's it. It stays there until you come back and it's still in the same place. It never moves, right? It doesn't work that way inside the editor. It doesn't really have a runtime environment like the game does, right? All right. So like I said, scenario number one is you test things in game and you see that things have moved around, and okay, that's to be expected. Scenario number two is you log into Giant's editor and find that things have moved around. What kind of sorcery is this? All right. It happens. Now, this particular scenario, the way that I understand it, when this person came back into the editor, literally every one of their signs were either moved, like maybe to the complete other side of the street, or they were spun around, or they were laying on their side. And then I guess there was garbage cans. I'm not sure about this one. Garbage cans on the side of a hill that rolled down a hill and into the water. and I'm laughing with you, not at you. All right. I've been through this. Now, it's been a long time because I know what causes this. And yes, I agree. When you're working in a static environment, like I said, where you put things, that's where they remain. That's what makes it a static environment. Things don't move until you move them, right? So one day when you log in and find that it looks like, you know, a virtual blizzard just kind of rolled through, or, you know, maybe some kind of a digital Bigfoot came running out of your woods while you were gone and ransacked your farming community. All right. I get it. You probably scratching your head wondering, are you going insane? What is going on here? All right. So let me explain a few things here. All right. It really did happen. Things really did move. You're not going insane. Or at least as far as I can tell. Maybe you are. I don't know. I don't judge either. So we're good. Anyhow, so let me explain this to you. All right. And I like I said, I completely agree that it's intriguing. All right. So within the game itself, we have something, and I know you've heard of them before. They're called collisions. Okay. And that's what's going on here. It's basically a collision. All right. Now, it makes sense, like I said, that during a runtime environment, this is what would happen. Now, let me see if I can give you a quick example here. I'm going to take all right, we're going to use this, and we're going to call this basically a collision. This is a rigid body. Okay. Now, rigid body is basically any object that basically it's solid. All right. And we can assign attributes, you know, to that rigid body, one of them being a collision. Now, the collision is normally, how do I want to explain this? Kind of think of it like a bounding box or something around that object. Okay. Like an invisible force field. There you go. It's a force field. We'll call it that. All right. Now, within that rigid body, you can see up here on the right hand side of my screen, we have three different types. Okay. We have this kinematic that you see there. All right. My pointer is not working right now. All right. But you have kinematic, static and dynamic. All right. So basically, you have two types. You have ones that move and ones that do not. All right. Static would obviously be the one that does not. The other two move. All right. So this is your rigid body. And kinematic, like I said, that moves, and dynamic move, right? They just move in different ways. All right. So here is your other rigid body. Okay. And it has its own force field, which we'll call a collision. Or it has its own collision that we'll call a force field. All right. So with these two rigid bodies now, all right, no matter what they are, whether it's let's say, for example, it's a tractor and a garbage can. Okay. So, or a stop sign. Stop sign is a good example. So here's our tractor, and here's our stop sign. All right. Now right here. Okay. So when two collisions come together, something needs to happen, right? One, if you have, say, like your tractor is coming up against a static object, it would just hit it. Maybe it's a wall and it would stop dead. All right. If the other object is dynamic and it's able to move like a garbage can or a stop sign, you'll run it over. All right. It's kind of a physics thing with every action. There's an equal and opposite reaction type thing, right? So you're basically transferring that energy. Something's going to happen, whether your vehicle stops or the other object goes on moving. All right. But that's, like I said, when you have two collisions that overlap. Now it could be a teeny tiny bit, or it could be as much as we see here. But when they come in contact with each other, something's going to happen. And that something has, like I said, it has to do with what type of collision that it is. The proper, because there's different properties for the collision, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. Oh, and it's what type of rigid body it is, whether it's a dynamic, static, and then, the properties of the collision itself. Should the object go flying? Should it just fall over? What does it react with? Does it react with static object, world objects? Does it react with terrain? There's a lot of options here. Okay. But that's basically, in a nutshell, it boils down to what you see here, which is collisions. Okay. Now, as far as the signs go, well, I know there was two parts to that question. So let me go over the other one real quick before we get into the signs and stuff like that. The other one was a vehicle. So you had a vehicle that basically stopped in the middle of an in the middle of an intersection and just sat there. All right. We established it wasn't the splines. The splines were okay, right? They weren't reversed. They weren't rotated, nothing like that. So what would cause that second thing? All right. Or what will cause the second thing? What else would cause that? I'm sorry. I'm tired. It's late. All right. So the other thing is also going to be a collision. Okay. And here's our collision. And this is pretty much what it looks like too. So you have a vehicle that we have there, right? Now, as this vehicle is driving down the roads, all right, this box here, and this box literally, it does exist. Okay. It's invisible, but it exists. And it's out in front of the vehicle. And anything that comes in this box, all right, it's basically breaking that force field, you can say, and the vehicle knows it's about to hit something, all right, so it stops, or maybe it's programmed to do something else, but in our case, generally it stops, all right. So as the vehicle makes like turns and stuff like that, because this sticks so far out past the front of the car, that may come off the side of the road a little bit. It may, you know what I mean? You're going to have some wiggle room there. But any object that you have too close to the road. So if your street is like, say here, it's probably not a really good example, but as the vehicle comes down, you can only imagine that, a little bit of this corner, might overhang that road, especially if it's a sharper turn, like a 90 degree. But if you have like, say, a utility pole, or maybe it's a telephone pole, it's a light pole, like some kind of light post, or it's a sign of some sort. Basically any object that you have just a little bit too close to the edge of that roadway, this collision here is going to detect it. I mean, it's not guaranteed that it's going to, but if it's just a little bit too close, it only takes a tiny bit. Like, say, just this corner here needs to detect anything in its path, and it's going to stop the vehicle. Okay. So in your case, that's probably what's going on. I'm willing to bet. So if you just go through that intersection of yours, and especially around the turn that vehicle is trying to make, like say if he's making a left turn, I'm not sure, depending on your situation, but whatever direction he's trying to turn, look in the sweep of that turn and see if there's any objects in there. Like I said, whether it's a light post, it's a street sign of some sort, telephone pole, you get the idea. Okay, so that's what's going on there, or at least that's my best guess. All right, now on to the stop sign thing. So how does this work? I know you guys understand how this works in a game environment, all right, in a runtime environment when things are able to move and supposed to move. All right, so how is this happening in game? All right, so first let me find my stop sign here. I'm going to put a stop sign down. There we go. And I'm going to explain a few things about the stop sign before I show you what is going on here. All right, so I explained the collision. Now, if you look at the stop sign, you can see the obvious parts of the stop sign, right? So we can see the sign itself and the post going down the center. All right, well, this little V shape on the outside is your collision, okay? Now, if you look at the bottom of this, the very bottom, let me see if I can get a good angle on that so you can see what I'm seeing. I guess that's a good enough angle. All right, so if you look at the very bottom right in here, okay, you see where this V comes down, and then it has this squarish part at the bottom here, and then heads back up. Oh my God, that looks hideous. But anyhow, that right there is your collision, okay? So from here at the bottom, oops, wait, I lost my pencil. So from here at the bottom of the collision to the bottom of your post, all right, that's basically all you want contacting the ground. Anything above that, like any of this that contacts the ground is no bueno. All right, and let me show you what I mean by that. So let me get out of pencil mode here. All right. So like I said, that's your collision there. Now, if you put your sign down, okay, so far what you see here is good, bad, okay? So you can't have that collision touching the terrain because it's going to react, right? Remember I said there's got to be something's going to happen when two collisions come in contact with each other. And it doesn't necessarily have to be two collisions, okay? So in this case, this collision may be darn it, I should have brought up there's a chart basically that says what each, and I'll show you really quick here. Let me see if I can find it. Darn it. Let's go into trash can, rigid body. All right, so you see here in rigid body, we have a thing right here called collision mask, all right? So when we click on that, all these check boxes here, each one of these check boxes, each one of these bits represents something different, whether it can react with the terrain, whether it reacts with other static objects, dynamic objects, right down the list. Now, I'm sorry I don't have the list on me now. I'm not prepared, I guess, but that's what these mean. It depends on what type of surface or other object or other collisions that this particular collision is able to, have a reaction from, let's just put it that way, okay? So in our case with the stop sign, it doesn't necessarily have to be another rigid body or another collision per se, right? It could be the terrain itself, all right? So in this case, it is the terrain. So with the stop sign being too low, the way that it is, if you can see down in there, all right, that this will be good. That would be bad. So normally what I do is I just bring it down just so it touches and that's good. Okay. You don't need it any lower than that. All right. Now, if you do have it too far, you have it down in here and you were to run the game. Okay. As soon as you run the game, now you wouldn't see it happen because unless you spawn right in front of that stop sign, you wouldn't see it happen. All right. But eventually you come driving down the road and it, look like an intoxicated driver, like your AIs have been drinking a little too much or something. Right. All right. So now that you understand what's going on there, how does this happen? I know this was the original question. It's taken me a long time to get there, but how does this happen within the editor? Okay. I know in the beginning, this stumped me too. All right. So if you remember, if you've been watching most of these tutorials, you may remember back at some point, I very, very, very briefly explained this play button. Okay. And what this play button does is it tests your physics. And by physics, I mean like collision physics, basically, right? So everything has, a reaction. It's physics. You get what I'm talking about, I'm sure. Okay. All right. So if you're not really looking at anything that's like physics related, and you hit the button, you hit that play button, you're like, oh, that didn't really do anything, but probably it did. So let's take this sign, for example, okay? So we have the collision set up in a state where it's going to get a reaction, right? It's coming in contact with the terrain. And this, the attributes for this particular collision says that's no bueno. We don't want to do that. So when you hit the play button, okay, now keep an eye on a stop sign. It's you're probably not going to miss this. It's pretty easy to see, but watch. And you hit the play button. All right. Did you see that? All right. That's what happens when you test it, okay? So probably at some point, you were looking off in this direction and you hit the play button like, what does this thing even do? And you're like, well, I guess nothing. I didn't see anything. It must not do anything, or at least I don't know what it does, but really it did. What it did was it knocked over all your signs and stuff like that, okay? Now, the garbage can that you're talking about that rolled down the hill, let me see if I can find a hill. That basically worked in a very similar fashion, right? Let me, hill. Where do I have a hill? I don't know if I have a steep enough hill. Wait, maybe this will work. Yep, that could work. All right, so we'll take your garbage can here, and we're going to put that right there. Ooh, boy, that doesn't look good. Yeah, let's put it on the side of the hill there. And I know that's a pretty bad spot for a garbage can, but hey, you never know. Like I said, I don't judge. So you have your garbage can sitting here. It looks pretty good, kind of, or at least to you. All right. So I like I said, I'm not judging. I don't want to know why your garbage can is on a hill. Nah, I can see, like, it depends on the situation. I get it. All right. So play button, garbage can, hill. Let's do this. Oh, and there you go. All right. So you see what's going on there? And it'll probably keep going. If he was on like a bigger hill there, he would probably just keep on rolling down the hill. All right. So that's what's happening. It's rolling down a hill and ended up in your water or wherever that ended up there. Okay. So now, as far as this goes, the way, like I said, I don't know a whole lot about the play button and physics and stuff like that, because I don't really get into that end of it. All right. I'd imagine the guys that are building vehicles and that type of thing, they probably have, more of a use for that button than I do. Or maybe I'm doing it wrong. You never know. Maybe making maps, you should be using that all the time. But I don't. I'm sorry. Like I said, I don't know something, I'm going to let you know. And that one, I do use it on occasion. Now, the thing with this play button, okay, let me explain one scenario here, okay? And this happened a while ago. I had roadways set up, not like this, not a painted roadway. It was, a hard surface. It was an object. And the collision at the time, I didn't have set, not that I didn't have it set correctly, but I had it set in such a way that it would react with items around it. All right. So, for example, like any kind of signs that you had next to the road. Well, in my situation, in this situation, I did have signs next to the road. I also had a wall, like a brick wall that was pretty close to the road. And when I ran this play button here, all right, it moved all the signs out of the way. It even separated the brick wall, which is kind of odd, but it did. So it had an effect on the collisions for those items. All right. And it was because, of an improper collision mask on the road. All right. Now, the problem that I had at that time was I was 99% done with my map. All right. And when I did this, I didn't realize that it happened right away. So I'd saved it. So there was no reload or anything to come back from this. It was a yucky situation. All right. And it moved an awful lot of things. Okay. So if you're going to do this now, let me give you another example. If you're going to use the play button, you can, like, say you went in and you moved an object at some point in your map, you got rid of like A, B, or C, you deleted it. And then you came back a little bit later and you tried to test in game and you ran into an invisible object. All right. So chances are that invisible wall that you're running into, when you remove that object in the editor, you left a collision behind. And by nature, collisions are invisible, so they're kind of hard to find sometimes. Right. But if you use this play button here, okay, you can see that collision. Now, like I said, normally when I would look for something like that, what I would do is I would highlight the parent transform group for like gameplay, because you can see right down here, we have a trigger that's not normally visible. And then I would do the same thing for map, and I would go through all my parent transform groups to see if it stands out, right? If there's an outline for that collision. And if I don't see it that way, right? If I can't spot it that way, you almost certainly always spot it if you turn on your test button, your play button, right? You'll definitely see it, right? Because you can see all the collisions, you know what I mean? See all the ones for like my borders, or my I guess not borders, but you know what I'm talking about. My barriers for the map barriers. All right. But if you're going to do that, you want to do that. You want to be doing that from step one, right? As you're building the map. Don't wait until the very, very end to go ahead and start using that, because all kinds of things are going to move if you have things set up improperly. So that's the deal with that. All right. What else do I want to get into? I think that might be it. All right. So like I said, everything is on that play button. That's what that is. It's just testing, your collision physics. So like I said, I do use it that way every once in a while, usually troubleshooting. If I have a collision that I know is in the map that, like maybe I left behind by accident and I can't find it any other way, I'll find it that way. Now, what you could do is you could use it for testing purposes. So let's say you build this area here. You can kind of turn it on and just see if anything is, reacting with one another. I'm not sure that's really the way that it's supposed to be used. I'm pretty sure it's like when you're building something that actually has some kind of physics applied to it. You know what I mean? That you're using it to test tools and tractors, stuff like that, right? But I guess it has its uses. If you can think of using it in a different way, then by all means. But what I do generally as a rule of thumb is I just leave it the heck alone, because I don't really have a use for it except for making signs fall over and stuff like that. Now, in the case of this sign, okay, so let's say that you have something that happened. Let me find the sign again. Say you have something like this where this happened, all right? Let me see. I need to import another sign really quick. Give me 1 second. Let me bring another sign in here. Okay. All right, so you have this stop sign that fell over. Now, as you can see, our y-axis is pointing up like it normally does, but the sign is down. Now, trying to rotate that spline trying to rotate the object and get it standing back up like so, it's going to be a nightmare. You're going to have to freeze transformations and all that other jazz, and it's just not going to work great, right? And especially if you had tons of objects that moved, or at least a lot of them, it's going to be a pain. All right, so if you guys haven't done this yet, learn how to use the replace function. And by that, I mean highlight the stop sign, right? So highlight the stop sign here and hit Control W. All right, and that brings up this replace box. All right, now the first one up here is your target. All right, so our target is the stop sign, right? This is our target, and you want to load that. Now, when we hit Control W, we loaded it. But if you already have this open and you're using it on another object, just highlight the stop sign, click on load. All right. And then what do you want to replace it with? Okay. Well, I want to replace it with a stop sign that doesn't have issues. All right. So I'm going to highlight the one that I just imported and I'm going to click load. All right. Now you have some options here, like keep attributes, keep physics attributes, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I can leave them all blank. In this case, it's fine. And then just click replace. And then there you go. Our stop sign is back the way that it was, standing upright. And when you look at this one right here, see, that's the same stop sign. It's back to the way it was. So that is a whole lot easier, trust me, than going through and trying to stand them up and straighten it out. Just use your replace function and replace that object with one that doesn't have those issues, and do it before you move anything, or else, you're going to put it in a weird spot. All right. So hopefully that made a little bit of sense to you. Hopefully that answered your question as to why everything was like laying down when you came into your back to your editor after a little while. All right. So I'd hate to break the bad news to you that, yes, it's something that you did. You broke your map. Shame on you. Not a big deal, man. We've all done it. But that's it, right? That's the answer to your question. So really hope that helped. I really hope that helped. And like I said, if you guys find these videos helpful in any way, shape, or form, definitely leave a like, subscribe, that sort of thing helps me out. And hopefully the answer to that question helps all of you guys in case you ever run up against that scenario, or not to get yourself into that scenario in the first place. And with that being said, I am Bauer Brown, and I will see you on the next one.